Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Talks in Class. I am your host, Jenna. Thank you so much for joining me today on the pod. I'm so happy to have you here with me. I am coming to you from a very gloomy morning here in LA. So happy fall. It is officially fall and almost October. So we've got spooky season in full swing. I have a couple of episodes coming up that are kind of spooky season themed or spooky season inspired. So if you are also a fall lover or a Halloween lover, welcome to the season. So I hope you've all had a nice couple of weeks since we were last together on the pod. I am kind of enjoying the calm before the storm, and the storm is October. I love the month of October. It's actually one of my favorite months. It's just like peak fall, the vibes are right, it's fun, but it is always such a busy month, and this year is no exception. I'm going to Wisconsin for a couple of weeks, so you will see an episode from the Time Capsule Bedroom soon, and then we are also going back to the East Coast for a little while, so it's just a lot going on. And then, it's October, so it's Halloween time, so there's like events and just a lot to cram in. I'm very excited about it, but I've been enjoying a little bit of a calmer last couple of weeks before all of that gets started. As always, I will start with my what good happened for the week, and I think I'm going to go with this one. My what could happen is that I have been trying to create kind of a merch item, we'll just call it that for simplicity's sake. And this is a lesson that I've learned. Everything seems very simple until you start to do it. And then there are a million different decisions that you have to make and a million different things to research. And it was kind of overwhelming for me just because I wasn't sure what I was going to get quality-wise from these different companies because it was my first time doing this. So long story short, I did a lot of research. I made a lot of different contacts, and I finally just made a decision and I ordered it, and it should be here soon. I think it's going to turn out great. I'm really excited to show it to everybody, and I'm just really excited that I finally figured out this project and now I can check it off my list. So for this week's episode, I can't believe I haven't talked about this, and I feel like I've been saying this about every podcast episode as if I've talked about absolutely everything, but this was just such a huge part of the 2000s and 2000s fashion. So I wanted to do a proper deep dive into possibly the most iconic brand of the McBling fashion era, and that is Juicy Couture. And before we get into this week's episode, I did just want to quickly share an announcement that maybe some of you know. I haven't made a formal announcement about it, but I have been sharing it here and there on various social media. And that is that I launched an online boutique called Homeroom, which goes very well with the podcast Talks in Class. And it is a collection of women's clothing. My idea behind Homeroom was that I wanted to curate a collection of items that basically you can just easily mix and match. You can wear in a lot of different ways. As of right now, it is still very, very new, so my items are pretty limited, but I have really big plans for it in the future. I am introducing some Homeroom original items. One of them I just mentioned in the intro. If you'd like to check it out, the website is homeroombyjb.com, and you can find it on Instagram at homeroombyjb. That is where I always post new things first. So be sure to stay tuned for all of the new exciting things that I hopefully will have coming in the very near future. It's very interesting to me how the nostalgia wave has evolved over the past 4 or 5 years or whatever it's been, going from an obsession with the 90s and Y2K to a more detailed conversation around specific fashion trends within the decade, mostly of the 2000s, and terms like McBling becoming very well known and even being then subdivided into more specific categories and aesthetics online, to now kind of a renewed interest, it seems, in Tumblr and indie aesthetics and the later 2000s, and even nostalgia now for the early 2010s. And although I think I would say our brief cultural fascination with the McBling era of the 2000s is over, it has passed, probably at least in some part because of our current economic and social situations. Like, it's kind of harder to appreciate a time that was really defined by conspicuous wealth and excess when there's a cost of living crisis and people are facing massive inflation. Hence, indie sleaze coming back into the mainstream, I think. But if you've been here a while, you know, I will always have a very special place in my heart for all things 2000s and all things McBling, because that was my youth. My teen years were really defined by this period, and especially the McBling fashion kind of aesthetic. I was a teenager in the time of Paris and Kohl and Britney Spears and Lindsay Lohan, Abercrombie polo shirts and Hollister mini skirts and puka shell necklaces, Playboy bunny belly button rings, you know, tanning beds, and of course, juicy couture tracksuits. To me, there are a few brands that I would say really represent the McBling aesthetic in its fullest, but I would really put Von Dutch and Juicy at the top of the list for me. And maybe eventually I'll have to do a whole podcast on Von Dutch because that is really interesting. But there was a pretty decent, I think, Hulu documentary about the brand that was really interesting. But the thing about Juicy Couture is that it had a much more lasting legacy than a brand like Von Dutch. It defined McBling, but it almost made it past the McBling years. Because for all the impact that Von Dutch had on McBling fashion, and it did, it really did, and also on the idea of utilizing celebrity to sell a brand, it came and went so fast. Like from 2003 to probably early 2005 was the entire lifespan of Von Dutch. It really went from relatively unknown to hottest brand on the planet for young people to donation bins in less than 2 solid years. I mean, it was crazy. And while Juicy Couture definitely had a huge rise and a pretty big fall as well, it did remain a constant, at least amongst like young, upper middle class kind of basic girl fashion throughout the entire decade of the 2000s. Obviously, most of us know Juicy Couture for their velour tracksuits, which became, I mean, essentially the uniform for all celebrities and all the cool rich girls all across the probably world in the early 2000s. But the roots of Juicy Couture actually go back to the 80s, the late 80s, when two best friends named Jayla and Pamela started a maternity brand of all things called Travis Jeans. And basically they just wanted fashionable maternity jeans, which were hard to find at the time. And I can't find a whole lot of information about Travis jeans out there. Nothing concrete anyway, but it seems like they were pretty popular, and actually Melanie Griffith was once photographed wearing them, which gave them a nice little boost in popularity and probably also contributed to the Friends' successful strategy later on of seeding their clothing items out to celebrities, which is really ultimately what put their brand on the map, much like Von Dutch. Eventually, the two pivoted their clothing line to other items, starting with a range of t-shirts. And their whole goal for the t-shirts was to make a flattering t-shirt for women, because a lot of the t-shirts at the time were designed probably by men on, you know, a size 0 straight mannequin. So they made this t-shirt and they introduced it in a wide variety of bright, some may say juicy colors. And it was at that point that they rebranded to Juicy Couture. This was sometime in the late 90s, either 96 or 97. There's conflicting information about the exact date out there, but this was really when Juicy as we know it was born. I think it's safe to say, though, that the Juicy tracksuit is what really defined Juicy as a brand, and even I think still defines it to this day. As a kid growing up in the 2000s, I coveted those damn overpriced tracksuits. Like, I wanted one so badly. And this is actually one of the, probably the only item that I make exceptions to my own rules for, because I'm generally very picky when it comes to the items that I feature in my throwback videos. You will not see it in a video if it wasn't something that I actually wore for real back in the day, that I owned back in the day. I mean, not just styles, but also notable brands. And of course, a lot of the clothes that I wear in my videos are things that were actually mine. But when I do thrift things, I'm very careful to pick things that are as close as possible to the ones that I used to own. But the exception are Juicy Couture tracksuits, because I never owned a real Juicy Couture tracksuit back in the day. And it's funny because my mom was pretty open-minded, we'll say, about my various fashion choices, some of which were not good. But she humored me a lot. And sometimes I would get higher end things as gifts. Like I got my Coach bags either for my birthday or Christmas, my Tiffany heart necklace, or my Uggs, even though I do remember my mom being really confused about Uggs. She could not wrap her mind around why I wanted them because she thought they were so ugly. But again, she humored me. But I don't know, I guess she drew the line at a $200 tracksuit. She was like, nope, that's sweatpants. Absolutely not. And I mean, I guess I also drew the line there because I saved up my little part-time after-school job money for a lot of kind of stupid things back in the day. A Von Dutch bowler bag, a pair of 7 for All Mankind jeans with Swarovski crystals on the butt. They actually came with like extra crystals because the crystals were so important. A Playboy bunny belly button ring that I remember was just like stupid expensive from Spencer's. But I don't know, I guess even for me, $200 or whatever it was at the time, I think it was between $150 and $200, was too much for a tracksuit. I did, however, have several knockoffs. I was kind of a knockoff queen. When I think back, I had a lot of knockoffs of things, but my knockoff tracksuits were mostly from Express, and those were fine. I mean, they did the trick, especially in a small town in Wisconsin. So Juicy Couture officially launched their velour tracksuit in 2001. And Jayla and Pamela's strategy for promoting the tracksuit, and really by extension the whole brand in general, was pretty unconventional for the time, but it was basically an early example of what we would think of now as influencer marketing. Except in 2001, we didn't have social media and therefore we didn't have influencers. So the influencers in this case were massive celebrities. And now, of course, this is second nature. When a brand does a launch, probably 9 times out of 10, they do some sort of gifting campaign where they send samples out to influencers and celebrities in order to generate, basically free publicity. But in the early 2000s, this wasn't really a thing. The only place that this was really kind of happening was on red carpets. You know, fashion houses would dress celebrities for things like award shows so that when Joan Rivers asked them on the red carpet, who are you wearing? They would get press from the celebrity talking about their brand, obviously. But other than things like that, advertising was much more traditional. There was paid product placement in movies and TV, but otherwise it was like, a spread in a fashion magazine. You had to pay for an ad in a fashion magazine or a billboard or a television commercial. Fashion brands made television commercials back in the day, like the iconic Calvin Klein commercials. It was a TV commercial, and that was really expensive to do. So Jayla and Pamela grew their brand in a very, very different way. They didn't do any traditional advertising. And whether this was maybe just a really smart marketing move or if it was really due to budget constraints because traditional advertising was so expensive, Jayla and Pamela did this through their celebrity relationships. And it worked. Safe to say. We're still talking about Juicy Couture and it's been 20 years. They set up essentially a gifting suite is what we would call it now at the Chateau Marmont, which is a hotel in LA. It's a famous celebrity hotspot and it has been for decades. But they invited all of these like young A-list celebrities, and I mean A-list, like J-Lo and Madonna, to come to their suite at the Chateau and essentially just get free stuff, come and pick up free stuff. And now this is a thing. Influencers get invited to these like gifting suites where you can just walk around and get free things. But again, this was kind of cutting edge in 2001. And once again, it worked like a charm. Because as someone who lived through this whole era, I never heard of this brand, but it was like overnight, it almost felt like all of a sudden every young, cool celebrity was being photographed running around everywhere in these tracksuits. It was like an explosion of brightly colored velour on every celebrity you can imagine. And I don't know if this is actually true or not because I can't find it anywhere except for Wikipedia. So, take it as you will. But allegedly, the first tracksuit was actually created specifically for Madonna, and she was the first person to be photographed wearing it. And now I know Madonna doesn't have the same cultural power as she once did, but in the early 2000s, Madonna was still a very big star. She was still on people's minds. For context, the iconic VMA performance with Britney and Christina and Madonna and the kiss that everybody was in a tizzy about was in 2003. So in 2001, Madonna was still very much culturally relevant. She was still making music at the time. She had just put out an album, I think in 99 or 2000. She was still making headlines. Jennifer Lopez was also an early Juicy Couture influencer, I guess we could call her, and really helped the brand blow up when she wore, this is crazy, she wore a gifted pink tracksuit in her music video for the song I'm Real, which is one of my favorite JLo songs. This is actually crazy when you think about it from like a marketing or advertising perspective. Juicy Couture sent her a tracksuit, a baby pink tracksuit, as a gift. You know, just here you go, here's a free tracksuit. And I don't know, they were probably just hoping maybe somebody, like some paparazzi will snap a photo of her walking into the airport or like going to get a coffee or something in this tracksuit. And JLo decided to wear it in a music video. Like she scrapped whatever outfits that they had already pulled for the shoot and decided to wear this tracksuit instead. Like, brands pay big money for that type of product placement, and JLo just was like, I like this free tracksuit that this brand I've never really heard of sent me. I'm gonna wear it in my music video. That's actually wild. Talk about successful freaking marketing. And this was also right around the time of like Bennifer 1.0, original Bennifer. I mean, JLo was everywhere. People could not shut up about JLo. Her butt, her and Ben. I mean, she was making headlines like crazy. So this was a huge win for Juicy Couture when she decided to wear this in her music video. And still, to this day, when I think about Juicy tracksuits, JLo is one of the images that immediately pops into my mind. It's like JLo in a pink tracksuit with big hoop earrings and clear rimless plastic sunglasses. And actually, I'm 100% sure I've told this story before. I'm starting to sound like a grandma. It just has like the same stories on a loop. But when I got my first pair of those clear plastic, like rimless 2000 sunglasses, I called them JLo sunglasses. I didn't have a term for them because they were different than normal sunglasses that had a frame, and that's what I called them. They were JLo sunglasses to me. But looking back at this little period, like 2001, 2002, I think I had a vague awareness of the tracksuit kind of as a concept or as a style, but not necessarily the brand. Actually, I'm almost positive I did not know the brand, like the name Juicy Couture at the time. At the time, I think I just recognized it as like, you know, a thing that I had seen around, like the JLo sunglasses. I recognized them, but I didn't really have a way to name them or categorize them or define them yet. I didn't really learn about the brand Juicy Couture until a very, very important moment in millennial history and McBling fashion history, which was the premiere of The Simple Life with Paris and Kohl in 2003. And I know I've talked about this before, probably a little too much, but the impact of The Simple Life was so profound to me, especially when it came to fashion. And I know this sounds really dramatic, but because we're talking about like trucker hats and sweatpants and graphic tees, but it seriously was, because at the time you could tell that we were leaving Y2K. Like we had left Y2K behind. That was very noticeable, and we were moving towards something else, but I don't think I had a clear picture or understanding of what that something else was until I saw Paris and Nicole on The Simple Life, and I was able to say, oh, that's it. We left Y2K and this is the new thing. This is exactly what we have moved into. They had like the long, kind of scraggly hair extensions, but just like very not trying to look real hair extensions. They were super tan, again, not trying to look natural, just a ton of MAC lip gloss. And of course, their outfits. They were dressed almost completely in things like Juicy and Von Dutch every single episode. It was a ton of color. It was like so completely different from Y2K. It was just so easy to say, yeah, this is the new thing. This is the cool new thing. And that was the moment that I learned what Juicy Couture was. And there are so many iconic looks from that show and so many things that when I think of Juicy I think about that show. Like Nicole wearing the Dude, Where's My Couture graphic tee. It's like blue and it has glittery graphic on it. Like I can picture her sitting on the couch wearing that graphic tee. And the low-rise tracksuit pants like basically falling off of Paris because she was so skinny. In basically every episode she had a pair of those just like kind of like falling off of her hip bones. And around the same time, Juicy just absolutely exploded onto the young Hollywood celebrity scene. Lindsay Lohan, Britney Spears. Like Britney Spears had her bridal party wearing pink Juicy Couture tracksuits while getting ready for her wedding to Kevin Federline. Okay, like it was a full-blown cultural phenomenon that really came from these young, like paparazzi favorite stars who were just providing endless content for, you know, the gossip blogs like Perez Hilton and things like TMZ. And I think this time period was just so perfect for something like this because the pre-2008, 2000s at least, were so much about excess and about wealth, but also about celebrity. Celebrity was really important to the culture of the 2000s. But a specific type of celebrity. It was a very young celebrity, uber famous, almost like fame hungry, very carefree, almost careless, and rich and shameless about those things, including their wealth and their spending. There was no shame around it, and that was like the appeal to these young stars. It was what set them apart, and it's so different now. I mean, night and day different. Now it's like, everyone has to try to come across as relatable and down to earth. And it's just opposite of what it was at that time. And, you know, maybe this is why suddenly there's like this huge backlash against J-Lo, because for all her, you know, Jenny from the Block and On the Six, she has kind of made a personal brand for herself as like a fame-hungry diva. And in the 2000s, that was cool. That was even aspirational, but today's audiences don't want to see that. It's just very different. But in the 2000s, you know, celebrities, it was all about flaunting their newly acquired wealth. And that's important because aside from a few heiresses, it was very much new money, and it was obviously very much new money. But that was kind of the aesthetic of McBling, was very like tacky new money. And Juicy embraced this like to the fullest. It was expensive, but it was not classy. And the founders, Jayla and Pamela, actually said that they really liked the idea of giving their t-shirt line a name like Couture because they liked the irony of it. And I think that that's something that I actually really liked too, is that it was something that sounded fancy and luxurious, but it was something that I could wear. You know, I wasn't going to wear a gown, you know, couture gown anywhere, but I could wear a tracksuit to high school. You know, hypothetically, I could wear it. But that's why the brand and also the celebrities associated with the brand represent that time so perfectly too, because that was McBling in a nutshell. You know, expensive, but not sophisticated. I also think that brands like Juicy, like Von Dutch, were important because they made this celebrity influence work in a new way, because the things that they were suddenly influencing us to wear, luxury denim is another example, or premium denim is another example of this, they were things that for the first time were actually somewhat attainable. You know, like a glittery graphic tee that was stupid expensive was still attainable if you really wanted to. You know, if you really wanted to spend the money, you could go buy that glittery graphic tee or that tracksuit. You weren't going to buy a designer gown. That just wasn't going to happen. But then, like everything, basically, that defined the McBling fashion era, it all changed after 2008. And I talk a lot more in detail about all of this in my McBling fashion episode, but basically what it came down to, I think, was just it felt kind of gross to wear a $200 tracksuit when people everywhere were like losing everything. Everything just changed so drastically during that time period, but especially the idea of wealth. I think it became something really suddenly to be quiet about, even a subject to kind of tiptoe around, because, you know, you don't want to rub your expensive item and thereby rubbing your wealth in the faces of people who were losing their homes and their jobs and their life savings. Like that's not a cute look. But I think even before that 2008 marker, maybe by around 2006, 2007, the phenomenon of tracksuits had really died down. They were definitely still around. Celebrities were still wearing them. People were absolutely still buying them. But whenever something reaches the masses, its cool factor automatically drops, right? That's the nature of trends. They're based on the idea of access and exclusivity. But even though the tracksuit hype had died down as it just became a lot more common to see people in them, Juicy was still a hugely popular brand because they had a whole bunch of other stuff. They did a really good job of establishing themselves as an accessible luxury brand in a lot of different areas. And it was still a celebrity brand. It was still very cool. I still remember really liking it. It was just like the attention kind of shifted. Into the later 2000s, I remember things like the graphic tees being super popular. The jewelry and the perfumes were huge. I was like so obsessed with all of the perfumes and the purses, of course. I loved the purses. They were so fun. Those big velour purses that said Juicy, and they would have a bow or a heart charm or a crown charm or a dog. It was very cute. They even had flip-flops, I remember. I really wanted them, but they were also just stupid expensive, so I guess I settled for the Old Navy ones. But I did get Juicy Couture glasses in probably like 2007-ish, and I love them. I actually still have them. They are called the Drama Queen glasses. I looked them up. And they're the small rectangular plastic frames that were super popular at the time, but they're kind of a clear dark purple and they have a little gold crown on one side. They're really cute. Honestly, I should see if I could get my current prescription put in them. I would wear them. I would legitimately wear them now if I could get my new prescription put in them. And behind the scenes, Juicy Couture had sold to Liz Claiborne, the company, Liz Claiborne, way back in 2003. And whoever was really running the business behind the scenes throughout the 2000s was really smart, I think. They didn't rest on the tracksuits alone, which I think they could have done, but they saw wider opportunities to expand the brand and, really put Juicy on everything. And according to the good old internet, Juicy Couture's peak sales year was 2008 with $605 million in sales, which is a lot. But like any good come up story, there's going to be a downfall. And that downfall, unfortunately, came pretty quickly for Juicy. A year after the recession hit, Juicy Couture's sales started plummeting. So we're talking 2008, 2009. And again, you have to remember, Juicy was a brand all about the brand, like all about the label. And it was a brand that gained its popularity during a time when really the most important thing about an item of clothing was the brand or the label or the logo that was plastered on everything. And that all just changed basically overnight when the recession happened at the end of the 2000s. So they had this really strong, very recognizable brand identity, which was so amazing. And it was really important to their early success. Like they could not have had that success at that time without that brand identity, but it made it really difficult for them to pivot and adapt to this new post-recession or recession time period market, because everything about that recession market was kind of counter to the brand identity of Juicy. Like it would have been off-brand for them to pivot. So how do you do that? The whole brand was about bright colors and logos, and suddenly everyone was wearing black and gray, and there wasn't a logo in sight on anything. Everything just kind of shifted. So everything at Juicy kind of spiraled pretty quickly. They didn't pivot, they didn't adapt, they didn't add new styles to try to keep up with the market. So sales fell and fell and fell. The founders left the company in 2010. I believe they cited an inability to grow their brand or an inability to evolve the brand or something along those lines as their reason for leaving. Basically, they said, like, we can't help this brand. And they jumped ship. And then in 2013, just 5 years after their peak sales year, the company sold again. And the company that acquired Juicy announced that it would close all the US stores. And I remember being like devastated hearing that they were going to close the stores. I used to go to the Juicy Couture store on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, and like I remember they had this big black and white striped couch in that store. It was just such a cool store, and I remember just feeling like, oh, it's the end of an era. It was really sad. But then they one-upped themselves and issued possibly the biggest blow to all of us millennials who grew up just kind of worshiping this brand. They made a deal to start selling Juicy Couture in Kohl's. You guys, I remember when this was announced, it was like the entire facade of Juicy Couture just crumbled in front of our faces. Like, what do you mean you're gonna sell Juicy in Kohl's? It was supposed to be this luxury brand. It was supposed to be this celebrity status symbol. Like, that was the way that us, you know, peasants were able to feel like our little glimpse of feeling like Kim Kardashian or Britney Spears. That's the Juicy that we knew, and suddenly it's gonna be in Kohl's? Like, I remember seeing it at Bloomingdale's and Bergdorf's, and now it was gonna be at Kohl's. People were really shocked by this. And, you know, now I don't think this seems weird at all. Retailers like Target for sure and H&M have really normalized the idea of high-end brands doing collaborations with these like more discount mass retailers. But back then, this was still pretty wild. And this also wasn't a limited collab, right? This was just, we're going to close all the Juicy stores, but you can go buy it at Kohl's if you want it. It just felt like such a fall from grace. And it was sad. It really was. It was sad for fans of the brand. So 2014 was the end of the original reign of Juicy Couture. It went into Kohl's, you know, nobody cared anymore, and we all just kind of stopped wearing our Juicy, you know. The era was over, we were over it, we had moved on. And it also hadn't quite been long enough to feel the nostalgia for the brand. It was kind of that dead time. I feel like Abercrombie was really going through the same thing at that time. It was that dead time when people weren't interested in you anymore, but wasn't quite ready to bring it back. You know, you had to give a little bit more time for people to start missing the brand. And of course, we have since seen this happen. Juicy has actually had a pretty huge comeback. They started kind of pushing for this in the late 2010s. I think it was a little early, but it clicked in a huge way with the pandemic nostalgia boom. And now, I mean, you can buy Juicy Couture everywhere. You can buy it directly from Juicy on their website. You can also buy them at Urban Outfitters, which I believe are the same ones that they sell on the Juicy website. But then you can also buy all of their discounted versions. So there's Juicy for JCPenney, which is a much less expensive version at JCPenney, or there's Juicy for Forever 21. And actually, someone just sent me a picture of a rack of Juicy sweatsuits with Juicy like rhinestoned onto the butt at BJ's Wholesale. Earlier today, they sent me that photo. So safe to say it's easy to find Juicy nowadays. And of course, vintage Juicy, there's been a hot market for that. Vintage Juicy sells for, I mean, the same at least, if not more than it did when it was brand new in the 2000s, now on resale sites. And I never had a real Juicy tracksuit. I had plenty of other Juicy, but I never had a real Juicy tracksuit. And now I'm the proud owner of 5 Juicy jackets and 3 pairs of Juicy pants, all vintage originals that I have got from various places, including one full matching set. It's not just a bottom and a top that's the same color. It's literally a matching set, which is insane to even find, that I found at a flea market, and it's the same aqua blue color as the tracksuit, the Juicy tracksuit that Paris Hilton wears in the 2005 House of Wax remake, which I had specifically been looking for, I don't know, probably around 2 years at that point. I literally screamed. I let out like a little shriek when I saw it across the flea, and it's definitely at least one of my favorite, probably like top 2 or top 3 favorite secondhand finds ever, and probably one of my most prized possessions, if I'm being totally honest. I love it. So it's safe to say that I'm a loyal fan of the brand. I am a loyal Juicy Couture fan. It will always be iconic to me, and it will always represent the 2000s in such a perfect way. So as always, I will finish this episode with a list, and speaking of iconic, these are my top 5 most iconic Juicy Couture celebrity moments of the 2000s. Number 5 is Kim Kardashian in a pink Juicy Couture tracksuit. going to watch Kanye perform at the 2007 VMAs. And this was actually before they really knew each other. Apparently, according to Kim, her people got a call from his people saying that he wanted her in the audience. So she went, and this picture was snapped when she was on her way. She is wearing the tracksuit head to toe, top and bottom together. And then she also has a, gigantic, huge Louis Vuitton rainbow monogram bag. Ugh, 10 out of 10 2000s outfit all around. Number 4, and this one is kind of cheating because technically she's not a celebrity because she's a fictional character, but Mrs. George being a cool mom in her bubblegum pink tracksuit in Mean Girls. You can't think of juicy tracksuits without thinking of Mrs. George. This moment deserves a place in the fictional, in my brain, Juicy Couture Hall of Fame. Number 3 is Britney Spears wearing a white tracksuit with Mrs. Federline embroidered on the back of it before her 2004 wedding to Kevin Federline, while her bridesmaids, including a baby Jamie Lynn, wore matching pink Juicy Couture tracksuits. I remember these pictures being all over the tabloids after their wedding, not just because everyone was so shocked that she married Kevin Federline, but everybody just ate up the fact that she had her bridesmaids in matching pink Juicy Couture. And now that I'm thinking about it, I'm kind of mad that I didn't think about putting my bridesmaids in matching pink Juicy Couture. Number 2, Lindsay Lohan wearing a full Juicy Couture tracksuit with flip-flops, like regular old flip-flops, and a skinny scarf around her neck, not on the street, on a red carpet, a literal red carpet. You really, you cannot get more early 2000s than that. And number 1, literally every single thing that Paris and Nicole wore on seasons 1 and 2 of The Simple Life. I will forever think of these two and that show when I think of glittery Juicy Couture graphic tees and brightly colored velour sweatsuits. They are my juicy queens. Thank you all so much for joining me on this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, I always appreciate it if you share the episode or share the podcast with somebody else who might enjoy it. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'll be back on the next one. Bye!